masterclass on becoming an experienced architect. The fire. Before we start, I want you to picture a fire. Not a fire on a screen. Not a fire as a metaphor for passion or transformation or whatever the mood board said. An actual fire. In a clearing, in cold air. The heat reaches your skin before it reaches your brain. You can smell the resin burning off. You hear the sap pop. The light never repeats the same pattern twice. Now some housekeeping about that fire. Nobody optimized it for your attention. No algorithm tested whether you would find it engaging. Nobody measured your dwell time, your completion rate, or your likelihood of sharing it with your network. It has no hook in the first 3 seconds. It has terrible pacing. It is, by every metric our industry uses, an absolute failure of a piece of content, and you cannot look away from it. That is the whole talk. Everything else is mechanism. For the next hour, I am going to argue 3 things. 1, the deal that used to exist between people who make things and people who encounter them is dead and it is not coming back. 2, what still works is not quality, it is specificity. And I can tell you exactly why in terms of your nervous system. 3, you are not a content creator anymore. You are an experience architect, and it is the only job description that survives contact with artificial intelligence, right? Let us go. Part 1. The contract is void. The old deal was beautifully simple. Make something competent. Put it where people can find it. Attention follows. That worked because competence was expensive. A clean edit, a professional finish, a well-built argument. Those cost money and time and taste. Cost was the filter. It kept the volume manageable, and it rewarded the people who invested in craft. That contract is not weakened. It is not under pressure. It is void. Competence is free now. Structure is a template. Production value is a slider in software that costs less per month than your coffee subscription. You can shoot on a phone with a sensor that beats equipment which cost 6 figures 15 years ago. You can edit in an interface designed specifically to stop you making mistakes. You can grade it with a preset, score it with a library track, and push it to every platform with one upload. The result will be clean. It will be competent. And it will be indistinguishable from several million other things made the same way that same afternoon. Here is the shape of the problem. The floor has risen. The ceiling has not moved. The middle of the distribution is packed with material that would have been called well-made not long ago. But the top, the work that actually changes how someone sees something, has not come down to meet the rising floor. It has only become harder to reach, because the noise around it is now so dense that getting there requires a different kind of signal. Watch short-form video, the whole cycle compressed into about 4 years. At the beginning, a well-lit talking head with clear audio stood out. Then everyone bought the same ring light and the same microphone, so jump cuts and text overlays stood out. Then that became the baseline, so cinematic B-roll and drone shots and licensed music stood out. Now they do not. Every improvement in average quality got adopted by enough people that it stopped being a differentiator, and the cycle keeps accelerating because the tools keep getting cheaper. The same thing happened to advertising. The industry spent decades competing on the expensive shoot, the celebrity, the immaculate post. Those still exist, they just do not move the needle because every brand has the same access. The ads people actually talk about are almost always the ones with something specific and unexpected in them. A particular facial expression, a line that could only have been written by somebody who had been in that exact situation. And the same thing happened to film school. A student film from 2026 is technically indistinguishable from broadcast. But the moment that makes you lean forward in your seat, the unexplained pause, the gesture nobody staged, the framing that reveals what the dialogue does not, that has not got easier. It has got harder because all that surrounding competence has made audiences impatient with anything that does not immediately justify itself. So quality has not stopped mattering. It has stopped filtering. Quality is now the entry fee. It is the thing you need just to be ignored at the same level as everybody else who also met the baseline. You need something else. And the something else is not another skill, another tool, or another template you can download. It comes out of a specific body with a specific history. Compare 2 interviews. The first is perfectly lit on a cinema camera, professionally graded, licensed soundtrack, costs almost nothing now, looks like every other perfectly lit interview. The second one has a subject who pauses for 4 seconds and you watch their jaw tighten. The room tone carries that particular quality of silence you only get in a space with high ceilings and hard floors. The camera drifts slightly off-center at the exact moment their voice drops. That second combination is not reproducible from a template. It is a function of a person in a room noticing something and having the nerve to leave it in. Part 2. What your body does before you do so. Why does that work? Why does one specific detail get through when everything else gets filtered? Because your nervous system does not wait for your conscious mind to sign off on a piece of content before it starts reacting to it. That is not a poetic flourish. It is a documented sequence. Input arrives through the eyes, the ears, the skin. The thalamus distributes it. The amygdala flags anything emotionally relevant before the cortex has finished working out what the input even is. You are affected before you are aware that you are being affected. This system predates language, predates reason, and predates the entire apparatus of critical evaluation that most of us are quietly designing for when we sit down to work. Psychology has a name for what happens when a story activates this system properly. Narrative transportation. You get pulled in, your capacity for counter-arguing drops, your emotional responses intensify. You lose track of time, decades of lab work, and the findings hold across media, cultures, and demographics. Here is the part that should reorganize your week. The strongest predictor of narrative transportation is not plot structure, it is not production value, it is not even character identification on its own. It is vividness, the degree to which the work triggers specific, concrete sensory images in the body of the person encountering it. And vividness is not the same thing as detail. This is where most content strategy quietly dies. Detailed. The room was furnished with a mahogany desk, 2 leather chairs, and a bookcase containing 47 volumes arranged by author. That is detailed. It is also completely inert. It hands you a furniture inventory and asks you to do the assembly. Vivid. The desk had a ring stain the color of rust where someone had left a coffee cup every morning for what looked like years. Shorter, less information, enormously more powerful. Because you have seen that stain. You know the habit it implies. Your nervous system builds the rest of the room without being asked. The mechanism is identification, but not in the marketing sense of relating to a character's demographics. In the physical sense of your body, recognizing something it has already experienced. One precise detail acts as a shortcut into a whole network of stored sensory memory. The smell of pine resin does not just remind you of a forest. It brings back the cold air in your sinuses, the crunch of needles underfoot, the way sound carries differently in open timber. One well-chosen detail pulls an entire sensorium online. Now notice something about that coffee stain. It works regardless of who is hearing it. You do not need to have worked in an office. You do not need a particular cultural background. The nervous system does not check demographics before it responds. It responds to the sensory match, which means, and I want to be very clear about this because it is counterintuitive. Specificity is not narrowcasting. It is the opposite. It is finding the sensory experiences that are widely shared but rarely articulated and naming them precisely enough that the body recognizes itself. The practical implication runs against almost everything taught in content strategy. When we want to hold attention, we add more cuts, more information, more visual density, more data points. But the nervous system does not process more, it filters more. The harder you push volume at it, the harder it pushes back. Specificity works the other way. It offers less input, and what it does offer is calibrated to slip past the filter entirely. One precise observation does more work than 1,000 words of context or 100,000 euros of production. The detail does not argue for your attention, it takes it before you have a chance to argue back. Nervous system learns to filter them. This is a principle. The body responds to specificity because specificity is the shape that real experience takes. A real kitchen smells different from a staged kitchen because a real kitchen has been used. A real voice carries tension that a trained voice smooths out. A real room has imperfections that prove a human life happened in it. Part 3. The optimization trap. Now for the uncomfortable part. The more you optimize for attention, the less attention you hold. That sounds like a contrarian slogan. It is not. It is a structural consequence, and you can watch it happen on any platform with public metrics. Here is the loop. You post something, it performs. The algorithm rewards it with reach. You analyze what worked, find the pattern, and make more of it. Your audience, seeing more of the same, engages slightly less. The algorithm notices the dip, you double down on the pattern, engagement falls further, optimize for a metric, and you converge on the inputs that maximize it. When everybody optimizes for the same metric, everybody converges on the same inputs. That is a homogeneity spiral. Content gets more polished, more formulaic, and less effective all at once. The mechanism underneath is habituation. Repeated exposure to a stimulus reduces the response it produces. Your nervous system is built to stop spending resources on predictable input. If a sound or an image or a narrative pattern does not change between exposures, the brain downgrades the processing it gives it. This is why the second chorus of a song hits differently from the first, and why the 50th time you hear that hook, it produces precisely nothing. The neurons involved have literally reduced their firing rate. March, a format that goes viral in week 1, is tiresome by week 4. And the optimization loop accelerates this, because optimization requires measurement. Measurement requires repetition, and repetition requires consistency. The act of systematically improving your content makes it more predictable and therefore less capable of triggering the exact response you are optimizing for. You are climbing a ladder that is being pulled into the ground underneath you. Templates are the most visible version of this. A template is a pre-validated structure. It worked for someone else, so it should work for you, and it does, briefly. By the 100th variation, the template no longer signals quality or care. It signals conformity. It tells the nervous system, nothing new here, you have seen this pattern. Filter activates, registered and discarded in the same instant. There is a further consequence nobody talks about. Audiences do not just filter individual pieces, they start filtering categories. A viewer who has seen 30 videos with the same intro structure will skip the intro, then skip the video, then avoid the whole category. The habituation spreads to the format, then the platform, then the medium. Optimization, pushed far enough, destroys the conditions that make optimization possible. You end up with perfectly optimized content that nobody has the neurological capacity to respond to. The more perfectly you execute a template, the more perfectly you signal to your audience that their attention is not required. The only reliable escape is a genuine departure from the pattern, which means accepting a temporary dip in your numbers in exchange for the possibility of re-engaging a nervous system on new terms. That is a nerve problem, not a knowledge problem. Part 4. Load-bearing versus ornamental. So how do you tell, inside your own work, which details are doing the job? There are 2 kinds of detail, and both of them can be beautifully executed. The difference is functional. The first kind is ornamental. It exists to create an impression of texture and richness. The extra camera angle that adds coverage but reveals nothing. The additional statistics supporting an argument you already made. The extended metaphor that decorates a point without advancing it. Ornamental detail is not worthless. It just arrives at the level of conscious evaluation, which means it lands after the filtering decision has already been taken. The second kind is load-bearing. Load-bearing detail does work that nothing else in the piece can do. It is the sensory particularity that triggers recognition in the body. It is the thing you would lose if you removed it, not because the argument would collapse, but because the audience would stop feeling and start merely understanding. Here is the test, and it is brutally simple. Take the detail out. Does the piece still make its case the same way? Then it was ornamental. Does removing it change not what the audience knows, but what they feel? Then it was load-bearing, and you defend it with your life. A description of a film set that lists the equipment, the crew positions, and the schedule is ornamental. It gives information. A description that notes the particular quality of silence on a set when the camera rolls, the way everybody holds their breath, and the ambient sound changes when the red light comes on, is load-bearing. It creates a physical understanding of tension that no amount of exposition could reach. This skill can be developed, but not through analysis. You develop it by catching the moments when your own body reacts to something and asking what exactly triggered it. Almost always it is the sensory particularity, not the information, even when the information was what the maker intended. The discipline is to notice what your body notices, and then to trust that noticing enough to put it in the work. The catch is that load-bearing detail cannot be reverse engineered from other people's successes because it depends on the specific experience of the person who made it. The sound of a particular rain on a particular roof is load-bearing in a piece about loneliness because it activates memories of solitude and weather and the acoustics of an empty room. The same detail in a piece about roofing materials is just information. The difference is not the detail, it is the relationship between the detail and the nervous system receiving it. Which brings us to artificial intelligence, and I want to state this plainly. An AI can describe a kitchen exhaustively, every appliance, every surface, every item in the pantry. What it cannot do is tell you how a kitchen smells at 6 in the morning when somebody has been cooking since 4. The way the heat hangs in a layer you feel on your face and your hands, but not on your legs. The way the grease on the backsplash is not quite shiny and not quite matte because it has been layered over weeks and wiped with a cloth that was damp, but not clean. That requires a body that was in that room at that hour, with a nose and skin and eyes that registered it. It requires sensory memory, not information about kitchens. AI has information. It has never stood in a kitchen. The same limit applies to research. Research gives you facts available to anyone with a connection. What produces load-bearing detail is the thing you noticed that was in no reference document. The way the light came through a window at a particular hour and caught the edge of a worktop and made you think of something else entirely. So here is the uncomfortable implication if you have built your practice on skills and tools and positioning. The value of your work is not primarily in your technique or your equipment. It is in the specific details your body has collected over the course of your life and your ability to spot which of them are load-bearing right now. That resource is not just scarce, it is uncopyable. In an age where every other input has been commodified, it is the most valuable thing you own. Part 5, the prediction machine. Now let me give you the mechanism underneath all of this, because it ties the whole thing together. Your audience's nervous system is not waiting to be impressed. It is already running a model of what it expects, and that model has been trained on thousands of hours of competent content. Every ring-lit talking head, every jump cut, every licensed track, every graded image has fed a generative template that the body now applies automatically. The dominant account in contemporary neuroscience is called predictive processing. The brain is not a passive receiver of sensory input. It is an active prediction engine, generating expectations at every level about what is coming next. When input matches the prediction, the brain registers a small prediction error and downweights the signal, processed minimally, discarded. When input violates the prediction in a way the model cannot absorb, it registers high precision prediction error, forces it up the hierarchy and allocates resources to it. That allocation is what you experience as attention. Now, prediction error is not surprise in the everyday sense. A jump scare is a formula, quiet, quiet, loud. A twist is a formula, setup, misdirection, reveal. The model already contains these patterns, so the error they produce is low precision. The system absorbs it without updating anything. A spike, then nothing. High precision prediction error is different. It happens when input violates expectations at a level of specificity the model could not have anticipated. Not something unexpected happened, but this particular sensory detail in this particular combination with this particular texture could not have been generated by any model I was already running. That error cannot be absorbed. It forces an update. And now we have a definition for the thing we have been circling. Residue is a lasting change in the generative model. Look at how this explains everything we have covered. The coffee stain works because the brain's model of office description expected generic furniture and received a specific physical trace of repeated human habit. The error is granular. The brain cannot absorb it by adjusting a parameter. It has to update the model. Load-bearing detail is the element that keeps generating error even after the scene has been categorized. In Moonlight, once the audience has filed the beach scene as a moment of vulnerability, the water poured over Chiron's head still produces error, because the specific temperature and weight and silence of that water are not part of any standard vulnerability scene. The detail keeps forcing processing. That is why it is remembered. Habituation is the progressive silencing of prediction error. Repetition makes the model more confident, precision weighting goes up, tolerance for error goes down. The 10th variation on a format produces almost nothing because the model already accounted for it. And this is why Polish is now self-defeating. A more precise grade fits the model of professional content more closely. A tighter edit follows the expected rhythm more accurately. A more consistent visual style reduces the variance the model has to account for. Every improvement makes your work easier for the prediction machine to swallow whole. 3 more examples, because they show different flavors of the same mechanism. In Obsession, the stare that slides from desire into ownership generates high-precision error because it violates the audience's model of the romantic gaze at a level of physical specificity no formula could produce. Your body already holds a model of what being looked at feels like. The film introduces a quality of invasive attention that the model did not contain. The error cannot be absorbed, so the model updates, and your generative model of being watched now carries a new variable, that is residue, built in front of you. In the back rooms, the corridor proportions are not impossible. They're about 2% off in every direction. That 2% generates continuous low-level error the system cannot resolve because every new corridor produces the same slight wrongness. The model keeps trying to update and keeps failing to land on a stable prediction. The audience experiences that as unease. The unease is not a genre effect, it is a prediction machine running at full capacity on a problem it cannot solve. In the zone of interest, the error comes from coexistence. The brain stores family home and death camp as separate, incompatible models. The film forces both active at once by putting the sounds of one inside the space of the other, children playing, a dog barking, pots on a stove, while the camp operates beyond the wall. The brain cannot fix it by updating one model because the input confirms both at the same time, so the error persists. It lodges, it becomes residue because there is no category to file it in. Part 6, 5 stages. Good, mechanism established. Here is the working method. 5 stages, and each one is a place where specificity usually dies. Stage 1, capture the sensory seed. Everything that produces residue starts with a body-level observation, not a concept. The test: can you describe the exact quality of light, air, sound, or temperature that made you notice in the first place? If not, you have a theme. You may have an excellent argument. You do not yet have the thing that bypasses the filter. Dig deeper or throw it away. In Parasite, it is rainwater cascading down the stairs into the family's home. Water on concrete in an enclosed space. The basement smell rising into a room never designed to be wet. The temperature change. That one sensory sequence carries the film's entire political argument without stating it. In Aftersun, it is the imperfect camcorder footage itself. The shake in a father's hand, the ordinary light of a budget hotel room. It looks like any home video from that era, which means it triggers your own. The payload is in the medium, not the message. In Obsession, the seed is the particular quality of a stare that starts as desire and slides into ownership. The way the skin prickles and the chest tightens. When somebody's attention turns invasive, that is not an idea about obsession, it is the bodily experience of it. And the nervous system does not check whether you have been in that exact relationship. It checks whether you have been in that body. So keep a sensory log, voice memo, or notebook. Record only what the body noticed, never the interpretation. The light at 4 a.m. on the canal made the surface of the water look like scratched metal is usable. Beautiful morning light is not. One contains a trigger another body can recognize. The other contains a judgment nobody's body can do anything with. Over years, that log becomes a library nobody else can assemble because nobody else was standing there. Stage 2. Protect the load-bearing detail. Apply the removal test to every sequence. Then force yourself to name the load-bearing detail out loud. If you cannot name it, that sequence is still conceptual. It contains ideas, not experiences. Keep working until you can point at the 1 or 2 details doing the real work, then defend them against unnecessary context, redundant coverage, explanatory dialogue, and the polish that smooths out exactly the imperfection where the detail lives. In Portrait of a Lady on Fire, it is a glance held a fraction too long, and the crackle of a fire in the background. 2 small things that do more erotic and political work than any explicit scene because they trigger your own memory of looking at someone slightly longer than convention allows. Stage 3. Design for transportation, not explanation. One precise sensory detail per major beat beats a page of context or a beautiful establishing shot. Replace abstract emotional language with concrete triggers. Not she felt trapped, but the specific physical constraint that makes a body feel trapped. Not the atmosphere was tense, but the exact quality of silence that made the silence feel loaded. Ozu builds the emotional emptiness of Tokyo Story entirely out of teacups, doorways, and train platforms. No exposition about generational fracture, just domestic ritual observed precisely enough that the body registers what the mind might resist. Bong does the same with the mud and rain of Memories of Murder, where the landscape becomes a character because it is observed that closely. Your audience's body has been doing this for hundreds of thousands of years. It is better at it than your explanation. Stage 4. Resist the habituation spiral. Vary rhythm, texture, and sensory density deliberately. Do not let consistency become a straitjacket. Let accidental and imperfect moments stay when they carry information the polished version would erase. Longer takes that hold past the conventional cut. Unexplained pauses that let the room become audible. A performance with a hesitation in it. Look at any long-running franchise. Each entry has higher production value, tighter editing, more consistent branding, and less residue. Not worse by any conventional measure, just more predictable. And predictable is precisely what the body is built to ignore. In the edit, one question: what could not have been staged? Keep that. Cut or shrink everything that could have been produced by anyone following the same brief. Stage 5. Measure residue, not the attention event. Views, retention curves, and opening weekend numbers measure contact. They do not measure what stayed after the contact ended, and what stays is the only thing that compounds. Residue is not impact. Impact is broad and immediate. The gasp, the laugh, the surprise. Residue is quieter and more durable. A joke has impact. A line you keep turning over for 3 days has residue. A shocking image has impact. The way a hand moved in the background of a shot, suggesting something the main action never addressed, has residue. Impact is what the metrics capture. Residue is what they miss. And residue is what memory is built out of. Your memory system does not store general impressions efficiently. It stores specific sensory episodes. You do not remember a nice dinner. You remember the taste of the sauce, the sound of the cork, the way the light caught the surface of the wine. So here is the arithmetic that should change your career. A creator with 1 million views on a piece that produces no residue has built nothing. In 30 days, nobody remembers it. In 90 days, their audience is no larger and no more loyal. 10,000 views on a piece with strong residue builds an asset because a percentage of those people carry it forward, mention it in conversation, come looking for more, and develop a loyalty that does not depend on an algorithm continuing to cooperate. One is a number on a dashboard. The other is equity. You can read residue on 3 timescales. Immediately, not volume, but intensity of recommendation. Somebody saying, you have to see this, there is this one moment, is producing residue. It was good is not. Second weekend growth counts because it means the first weekend told people. Medium term, interpretive debate. Close readings, people searching for the specific detail they remember instead of the title, return visits driven by word of mouth rather than spend. Long-term, cultural half-life, how long your images and lines keep surfacing in other people's work, in advertising, in edits and mood boards years after release until your name becomes shorthand for a kind of experience. There is a trap here worth naming. Most of us work on 48-hour feedback loops. We post, we check, we adjust. Residue runs on months and years. If you evaluate on a 2-day cycle, you will never see it. So you will optimize for what is visible, which is the attention event. That bias will quietly steer you toward work that performs well now and vanishes completely. The internal test, before you publish anything, if someone meets this once and never again, will any specific detail still be in their body a week later? Not will they like it, not will they share it. Will anything stick? If the answer is no, the piece may be competent, it may even perform, but it will not compound. Part 7, the job. Which brings me to what I actually think your job is now. Content creator and storyteller describe a role defined by output, the person who makes the thing. The role I am describing is defined by effect, the person who designs the conditions under which a nervous system will accept a specific detail and let it update the model. Experience architect. A content creator optimizes for volume, production quality, and reach. An experienced architect optimizes for residue. Offered a choice between a polished, predictable final product and an imperfect one holding an irreplaceable sensory moment, the content creator takes the polish because polish is what the systems reward. The experienced architect protects the moment because the moment produces the effect the systems cannot measure and the body cannot forget. This is not a rebrand, it is a description of what the best people already do. Bong Joon-ho did not just write a good script and shoot it well, he designed the conditions for that rain sequence. The prior of the Kim family's competence, the prior of the Park family's invulnerability, then the flood placed after both priors had time to settle. That is architecture. Here's what the same discipline looks like in 4 different rooms. A screenwriter cuts an explanatory line and replaces it with something the character does with their hands. The line was competent. The hands are specific. The body processes the movement before the conscious mind can categorize it. This is not a preference for showing over telling. It is a decision about which processing level to target. A director keeps the imperfect take. The clean one matches the audience's expectation of what good acting looks like. The imperfect one has a hesitation no rehearsal could reproduce, violating that expectation in an irreplaceable way. Not a taste for authenticity. A calculation about which version generates error precise enough to survive filtering. A marketer bins the demographic insight and uses a sensory trigger. Urban professionals aged 25 to 40 who value convenience is accurate and operates entirely at the conceptual level. It tells people something they already know about themselves. The specific sound the packaging makes when it opens, the particular release of pressure, the texture of the material giving way, that reaches the body first. Demographics target the categorizing mind. Sensory triggers target the body. A salesperson drops the feature list for a single, vivid consequence. Your prospect has a well-established model of what a pitch sounds like, and that model lets them filter most of it as predictable. So instead, the exact quality of silence in the room after the noise problem is solved, the feel of the material under their hand, the temperature change when the old system goes, those are not metaphors. They are sensory predictions their body can test, and it tests them before the analytical mind gets to run a competitor comparison. 4 rooms, 1 mechanism, design sequence, duration, and withholding so the error arrives at the right intensity and spacing. Hold 2 beats longer than convention wants. Refuse the explanation that would close the loop and let the nervous system file the experience as complete. Now, artificial intelligence, and let me be precise rather than sentimental about it, AI is extremely good at generating low precision prediction error, the familiar rhythms of genre, the expected emotional beats, the polished surface that signals competence, at scale, at speed, at close to zero cost. That is a production capability expansion continuous with everything that came before it. The cameras got cheaper, the software got better, and now the generation itself is automated. Same dynamic, cost drops, supply expands, the body's filtering gets more aggressive. What AI is structurally incapable of is generating high-precision prediction error that originates in a body that was present. It was not there. It did not see the light on the canal at 4 a.m. It did not feel the quality of a stare that starts as desire and slides into ownership. It can approximate by recombining its training data, and the result is always recognizable as an approximation because the model categorizes it as familiar. It is assembled from familiar components, so it gets filtered. So do not compete with AI on competence or volume. That competition is over and you lost it. Use it for the competent parts, formatting, secondary research, rough assembly, the Polish distribution demands, then spend every hour you get back on the work it cannot do. Being present, noticing, protecting the detail produces residue. The predictable is what the body filters. The person who lets AI supply the sensory seed, choose the load-bearing detail, or set the pace and the exit has confused the tool with the work. Back to the fire. I will not pretend this is easy. Designing for residue means protecting one specific detail against every pressure that wants to smooth it, generalize it, or swap it for something more efficient. Withholding when convention says explain, staying when convention says cut, leaving it imperfect when the client says polish. The patience to let a generative model settle before you violate it. And judging your own work by a metric no system can show you. whether anything will still be in somebody's body a week from now. The systems will keep rewarding volume, consistency, and pattern matching. Platforms measure what they can monetize. Clients request templates because templates can be evaluated against a brief. AI produces the predictable because the predictable is what it was trained on. None of that is going to reverse. The incentives are too large, and the body will keep filtering what it already knows. That is not going to change either. Those mechanisms are hundreds of thousands of years old. They are not a preference you can educate away. They are the operating system, and every single thing you make gets processed by them. So, the fire. It did not need a strategy, a content calendar, or a distribution plan. It needed wood, air, and a spark, and somebody to notice that the combination holds a human being without ever asking for their attention. The algorithm rewards consistency, volume, and pattern matching. The fire rewards specificity, presence, and unrepeatable detail. One gets you views, the other gets you remembered. They are not the same thing, and you have to choose which one you are working for. The fire is still burning. The question is whether you are designing for the heat or for the light. Thank you.